Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today we have something very unusual and something that I really enjoyed testing and reviewing, and it's Cayin RU6. And what's unique about it is that it's an R-2R DAC, and at the same time it's a small portable DAC. So basically, at least to my knowledge, I have never seen or heard about a DAC this small, this compact, that's fully portable. This is basically a dongle, it's a little bit bigger than that. So usually in the past, if you opt for this design, that means that instead of one tiny chip provided by Sabre or AK or Burr Brown or some company like that, small chip basically, instead of that you're using multiple resistors to do your DA conversion. And DACs relying on this topology are not that uncommon, especially lately, because that's like coming back. It's modern again to use resistors because that's one of the oldest technologies, but it's coming back. And for example, probably most of you know about Denafrips DACs. I'm using Denafrips RS2. That's an R-2R DAC. And all Denafrips products are. But here today we have this small device that's fully pocketable and portable, rocking R-2R design. And because of that, I'm quite excited to listen to it, to hear can it really offer that sound that some people quite love in this small package and for $250 US, which is, I don't know, we'll see if it's a good price or not, depending on how it performs. And as usual for these kind of portable DACs, it also includes headphone amplifiers, so you can connect headphones directly to it. You don't have to. You can connect this little DAC to an external headphone amplifier. You can connect it to an integrated amplifier in your big hi-fi, or preamp, then power amp. Basically, you can use it only as a DAC, that's not a problem. But if you wish to do so, you can also use its headphone output. And for that you have two different options of connecting. One is single-ended 3.5 millimeters, very common, like industry standard. And the other one is 4.4 balanced Pentacon. And I quite like that Cayin decided to use 4.4 because I like that much more than 2.5 millimeters balanced out. Other than that, there's one digital input, that USB-C that you can see here. Everything is straightforward. If you want to connect it to your phone, you just use this short cable. There's provided adapter from USB-C to this bigger USB-A port if you want to hook it up to your PC. I tried that. It works great with my Windows 10 and my desktop. It was recognized immediately, no drivers needed or anything. And it was the same with my phone, which is Android. I don't know how it behaves with Apple products because I don't use them. As soon as I connect it to my phone, you can see it turns on. There's a small OLED display and it shows you the sample rate of the files being played, loudness level, and some few basic settings that you can do by entering the menu. And regarding that, you basically have only three settings that you can change. Gain between low and high. And for most of my testing, I actually used low gain because it was quite sufficient for any headphones, even the bigger ones that I've tested this DAC with. Then you can adjust the time after which display will automatically turn off. That's also a neat function. And finally, you can choose between two oversampling modes. One being OS, which is oversampling, and the other one NOS, which is non-oversampling mode. And I'll just quickly get that out of the way here. Most of my testing was done with oversampling because to my ears it sounds superior. It has more texture, more speed, more details, wider soundstage, airier soundstage. Moving to NOS, it does sound warmer and fuller, but you lose width, air, details, texture. If you like NOS more, feel free to disagree with me in the comments, but for me oversampling mode does sound superior, and everything that I'm going to say in the rest of the video I'm saying about that mode. And the final feature that I wanted to mention is that volume hardware buttons are present, and this is truly hardware controlled volume. It's not this kind of arrangement where you push buttons but you actually control volume inside of your operating system. This one is completely separate and independent from the software side. So no matter what you do inside of the OS or inside of the player, you have this set of separate hardware controls on the DAC itself. And that's somewhat different than many other DACs that have some sort of integrated volume control that's based on a chip hardware, but you actually control it through the OS. But here you'll want, for the best possible sound quality, to keep your software volume at its max level, because that way you don't introduce any sort of software compression, dynamic range compression that comes when you actually control the volume in software. So you're outputting full signal level to the DAC, and then you control its volume by using its own hardware keys. That's the best way to do it, because if you decide to do something along the lines of I'll just max out the volume on the DAC, the signal will always be completely 100% amplified. And then if you control volume inside of the software, you'll just get the worst of both worlds. You'll have the highest possible noise coming from the head amp in your headphones, and you're going to get that compression that happens when you try to alter the volume inside of the software. So it's my strong recommendation that you keep your player and operating system volume level at their maximum and control the volume using hardware controls on the DAC. And now it's finally time to talk about the sound of Cayin RU6. And it really does sound as you would expect R-2R to sound. And the example of those types of multi-bit DACs are, among others, Schiit DACs. The cheapest among them is Schiit Modi multi-bit. But you have Bifrost and then even more expensive ones. R-2Rs, as I mentioned, like literally using resistors, are Denafribs DACs. And the RS2 is the most affordable of them. And I'm actually using that one in my own system and I like it. And I'm mentioning these because if you heard any of these DACs, you know that they have that kind of tone fullness and rich tone timbre that people often find lacking in these Delta Sigma DACs. But at the same time, those multi-bit DACs and R2R DACs do not sound as sharp and as resolving like their Delta Sigma chip-based competitors. And the same is completely true for Cayin RU6. It definitely has that type of sound that most of us would just call full and rich sounding. Because bassline is full, it really has a nice amount of density and weight. But again, it does have really decent amount of texture. So I never feel that that sort of weight comes at the expense of bassline being too bloated or just too melted. Because at all time you have that great sense of texture retrieval from the bass notes. But speed and quickness of bassline is not the greatest on the market. And same goes for sheer kick and punch. It's quite decent, but it's not like the most aggressive sounding, most nimble and hard-hitting sounding bassline. So it's more of a bassy, weighty, and nicely textured sound, but not really the most precise and quickest sounding one. And the same basically goes for the rest of the spectrum too. If we are talking about the mid-range, it has a lot of density, it has a lot of texture, and it has quite a reasonable, respectable amount of details. in isolation, when I listen to this DAC, I don't notice any details missing. Same goes for the highest frequencies. I don't feel that they're particularly rolled off, because I don't think they are. If anything, I would say that this DAC sounds quite reasonably bright. It has quite a bit airy sound to it. But as with the bass line, it doesn't focus on quickness and resolution. So if you're looking for the quickest transients possible, you'll not find that here. Some other DACs will do those quickie, sharp things that cut like knife better and with more precision. But what RU6 is doing great is making all of this sound unforced and very natural. And to my mind, it really has a great blend. Like, it does great balancing act between having that weight, having that density, having rich bass line and mid bass and mid range, and having enough of details and enough of textures that I never think listening to it that I'm missing anything, except if I directly compare it to something else. But that is a two-way street, you know? Because that other DAC is also missing something that RU6 does with ease. And that's basically how full and lush and just naturally dense everything sounds. And I think that that character of RU6 especially shines through with some type of slower and less cluttered music genres. And just by chance, those are my favorites. And you probably know that if you watch my channel regularly. Let's say you play some sort of blues or any tune with lots of acoustic instruments, RU6 will be on its turf. For example, play this one and vocal will sound so nice and so natural. And same goes for the instruments. All of that just feels very natural. If you compare it directly to some other more clear and crisp sounding DAC, only then you'll start to notice some things. That RU6 does not resolve edges and transients as well. For example, if I compare it to Aune BU2, which is priced the same, it's battery powered, so it's much bigger as you can see. BU2 definitely has cleaner, sharper sound, and it even has more dynamics. It sounds punchier. And in comparison to it, RU6 is milder sounding, both tonally and dynamically. It doesn't lean as heavily on those edges and transients, but it softens all of that a little bit. You do lose some resolution and some fine details in the process, but to my ears and my brain, that often actually sounds relaxing. So if I would to rate their transparency, I would definitely say BU2 wins, hands down. But sometimes, when I'm just on a cruise control and I just want to kick back and relax, I actually preferred RU6. I do acknowledge that it's technically inferior, but actually that softness and that fullness and that lack of sharpness is what my ears sometimes definitely prefer. Especially if I had like a tiring, stressful day. This just suits my nerves. And I can really see both type of listeners. Some preferring that technically more accomplished device, while the others preferring this one that is clearly not as technically accomplished and as resolving, but it has that something. It has that nice blend of fullness and juiciness and density and lushness of the sound, mixed with that unforced musicality that just feels natural. Then I quickly compared it to several other DACs that I had at hand. So the cheapest among them was Hidi's S9 Pro, And this one had slightly more bloated bassline, even though it's not R-2R, but its bassline is not as controlled and it doesn't feel as informative in terms of texture as RU6 bassline is. And while mid-range and higher frequencies are similar in terms of detail retrieval, they does not have that fullness and tonal richness that RU6 do have. Next was like Hidi's DH80S. This one is again a nice full sounding device, going for 150, something like that. And it feels a little bit darker sounding than RU6. It does have full bassline, but mid-range is a little bit more recessed, laid back, and same goes for the highest frequencies. So RU6 actually sounds brighter and a little bit airier, but in terms of resolving details, they're quite similar. To my ears, I think I just slightly preferred RU6 and its more airy and textury vibe. And I also definitely preferred its form factor that's smaller and doesn't need battery charging. But that said, Hidis is still a great device, especially if you like that slightly more laid back and darker presentation with full bassline. And finally, recently reviewed Beam 3 Pro, again, really good small DAC that sounds as clear, detailed, and mid-range rich as RU6, but bassline is not that weighty, definitely. It doesn't have the same heft that RU6 has. And because of that, the whole sound signature of Beam 3 Pro is leaner and a little bit more wiry, especially in the bass and mid-bass part. While RU6 offers that same amount of mid-range richness in details, with fuller bassline, fuller mid-bass, and with just overally weightier and heftier sound signature. So in the end, what can I conclude about Cayin RU6? You know I have a weak spot for these multi-bit DACs and R-2R DACs, and I definitely have a weak spot for DACs sounding really full and juicy and weighty. And because of it, I really do like it. And I especially liked that it's truly portable. So I can truly carry it around with me in my pocket with my phone. It is an R-2R DAC, but it's really small and pocketable. And it gets especially neat if you get this sort of leather case. I think there are several colors, but I really like this orange one. And you just slide it inside. And with this leather case, you get two of these magnetic tags that you can just stick on the back of your phone, like this. And then you have magnetic holder for your DAC every time you use it. And this leather case is purchased separately, but with it you get two of these small tags. So I suppose you can put them on two separate devices that you might be using these with. And that would basically be it. I suppose this is a DAC for people that really like that multi-bit sound. And by what I remember, this DAC can fully match the sound quality of Schiit Modi multi-bit. Because I don't have multi-bit with me anymore, but I did compare it with Danafrips RS2, and then I compared this one to Danafrips RS2. And I can tell you, you can definitely use this one in a big hi-fi setup. It provides similar sound fidelity to that one of Schiit Modi multi-bit, but in a smaller, more portable package. It cannot match what Danafrips RS2 can do. That one has better resolution and dynamics and like overall scale of the sound, but it can quite closely match Schiit Modi multi-bit in a smaller package. And while on the Schiit multi-bit topic, I believe that this is now the most affordable multi-bit R-2R DAC in the world if we are not talking about US. Because Schiit prices are great in the US, and multibit costs $250. But if you live anywhere outside of the US, prices are higher. In Europe, it's 300 something euros, which would be like 400 bucks. But I know that even if you order it from Schiit in the US, shipping rates are not that low as with these products coming from China. So that basically makes RU6 the most affordable multi-bit R-2R DAC in the world for the bigger part of the world, actually. Not for the US viewers, but for the rest of you. If you ever wanted to dip your toe in that R-2R world and hear how that sounds, and why so many people like that sound, even though they admit it's not always the technically most advanced one. Even if measurements are not perfect, and even if you can notice that some other DACs can offer slightly more details, why a lot of us, including me, really like and respect that type of tonality that these type of DACs are offering. And with that, it's time to end this video. Thank you for watching, guys. Click like, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron. That really helps the channel grow, stay independent, and bring even more interesting reviews. See you next time. Bye.